He looked me dead in the eyes and said the house was his, that I was the one who needed to pack my bags and step out into the freezing Toronto winter. He thought his plan was flawless. He thought he had completely drained my accounts to fund his secret life with a 22-year-old barista. But narcissists always make one fatal miscalculation. They mistake silence for weakness. My name is Tori. For 7 years, I was the perfect accommodating wife to a man who was secretly dismantling my life piece by piece. We lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom home in the Greater Toronto area. If you know anything about the Canadian real estate market, you know that acquiring a property like that requires blood, sweat, and working 80-hour weeks. And that is exactly what I did. I built a lucrative career in corporate finance. I'm grinding through every brutal winter, sacrificing my health and my youth to secure our future. Meanwhile, my husband, let us call him David, played the role of the struggling entrepreneur. He always had a new startup idea, a new venture that just needed a little more seed money, my money. Over the span of 48 months, I poured nearly $200,000 into his empty promises. I paid the mortgage. I paid for his luxury car lease. I even paid for his premium gym membership. I thought I was investing in our marriage. I was actually funding his double life. The cracks started showing in late October. It was one of those bitter, bone-chilling Canadian evenings where the snow turns to ice the second it hits the ground. David told me he had a late-night networking event downtown, so he left his backup tablet on the kitchen island. Now, I have never been the jealous type. I respected his privacy. But that night, the screen lit up with a notification that shattered my reality. It was an email receipt from a boutique jewelry store on Queen Street, a receipt for a $4,000 diamond pendant. I had not received any jewelry from him in over 5 years. I did not confront him. I did not scream. I did not throw his clothes onto the snowy driveway. When you are dealing with a parasite, making noise only gives them a chance to scurry into the shadows and hide their tracks. Instead, I made a cup of black coffee, sat at my dining table, and turned into a ghost in my own home. I shut off every emotion I had for that man. I spent the next 72 hours quietly digging through every shared digital footprint we had. What I found was a masterpiece of betrayal. David was not just cheating, he was systematically siphoning my earnings into a hidden offshore account. He was preparing to file for divorce, planning to claim half of the equity in my house, and leaving me with the massive debt he had secretly accrued under my name by forging my signature on a joint line of credit. He and his mistress had already been touring luxury condos in Vancouver, planning to start a fresh life using my life savings. He thought he had outsmarted me. He believed his web of lies was impenetrable. He relied on the assumption that the shock of the affair would make me emotional, hysterical, and prone to making irrational mistakes. But he forgot who he married. I deal with hostile corporate takeovers for a living. See, I dismantle multi-million-dollar companies that try to hide their assets. Destroying one arrogant narcissist was not a tragedy to me. It was just a new project. I smiled at him over breakfast the next morning. I asked him how his networking event went. I listened to him lie to my face with the ease of a seasoned psychopath. I nodded, poured him more coffee, and quietly began drafting his financial execution. I contacted the best forensic accountant in Ontario. I secured a ruthless legal shark who specialized in high-asset divorces. We operated entirely in the dark. For 6 weeks, I played the loving, oblivious wife while slowly tightening the noose around his bank accounts. David was confident he would take the house because we were legally married, which in Canada typically means a 50-50 split of the marital home, regardless of who pays the mortgage. He was so smug about his rights to my hard work. But there was a tiny, devastating detail he was entirely unaware of. A single piece of paper, signed exactly 10 years ago, locked away in a safety deposit box that he did not even know existed. And that piece of paper was about to turn his entire legally planned robbery into absolute dust. The first rule of a corporate counterstrike is simple. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched David strut around our Toronto home with the unearned confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He would sit on the custom leather sofa I paid for, sipping the expensive scotch I bought, texting his 22-year-old mistress about their future penthouse in Vancouver. I knew all of this because I had quietly mirrored his phone backups to a secure, encrypted server. Every heart emoji, every floor plan they discussed, every cruel joke they made about my age and my supposedly boring corporate lifestyle. It all went straight into a neatly organized digital folder labeled Exhibit A. My lawyer, a brilliant, terrifying woman named Sarah, sat across from me in her downtown office. She looked at the forged line of credit and the offshore wire transfers. She told me we could blow the whistle right then. We could freeze his accounts, call the authorities, and have him arrested for financial fraud. But I shook my head. A quick arrest would only give him a chance to play the victim. I did not just want him stopped. I wanted him financially obliterated. I wanted him to feel the exact moment the floor collapsed beneath him, leaving him with absolutely nothing. To buy that $2 million condo in British Columbia, David needed a massive amount of cash to close the deal. He had already drained my liquid savings to put down the initial $200,000 non-refundable deposit. To get the rest of the money, he needed to pull the equity out of our Toronto home. One Tuesday evening, the snow was falling heavily outside. David walked into the kitchen with a thick stack of legal papers. He kissed my cheek, a kiss that felt like a spider crawling across my skin, and casually mentioned he needed my signature for a routine business loan. He spun a beautiful, convincing lie about using the house as collateral, just temporarily, to fund a massive tech venture that would allow me to retire early. He was staring at me with those wide, innocent, pleading eyes. I looked down at the documents. It was a cash-out refinance agreement that would strip every ounce of equity I had built over 7 years of grueling work, dropping it directly into a holding company he controlled. "Trust me, Tori," he whispered softly. "This is for our future." I looked up at him. I gave him a warm, trusting smile. "I know it is, David," I replied. I took his expensive gold pen and signed exactly where he pointed. I signed every single page. I watched him exhale a massive sigh of relief, thinking he had just secured his new life. What David did not know was twofold. First, the signature I gave him was intentionally flawed, missing my middle initial and using a variation of my maiden name, which would inevitably trigger a fraud alert at the bank. Second, and far more importantly, my lawyer had already placed a shadow lien on the property 48 hours prior. No bank was going to approve that refinance. The closing date for his luxury Vancouver penthouse was set for a Friday. The refinance money from our Toronto house was supposed to hit his holding account on Thursday morning. Thursday morning came. David was packing a suitcase in our bedroom, humming a cheerful tune. You were telling me he had a weekend business trip. I sat quietly on the bed, watching him check his banking app. He refreshed it. He refreshed it again. The color completely drained from his face. His hands started to shake. The money was not there. And in exactly 24 hours, he was going to default on a $2 million real estate contract, losing his deposit and exposing him to a catastrophic lawsuit from the seller. But the best part? He still had no idea I was the one pulling the strings, and I was about to deliver the final blow. I watched him panic for exactly 4 minutes. He paced the bedroom, furiously tapping his phone screen, calling his bank, getting put on hold. The veins in his neck were bulging. He looked over at me, his face pale, and asked if there was some sort of glitch with the joint accounts. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "There is no glitch, David. The accounts are frozen. The refinance was blocked, and your Vancouver seller is preparing to sue you for breach of contract." He stopped breathing. The silence in the room was so profound, you could hear the winter wind howling against the window panes. He tried to laugh, a nervous, cracking sound, asking me what I was talking about. I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick black folder. I slid it across the duvet cover. It was all there. The photos of his 22-year-old mistress, the receipts for the diamond pendant, the forged signature on the line of credit, and the floor plans for the penthouse he thought he was buying with my blood and sweat. He fell to his knees. Literally. He started stammering, crying, begging, claiming it was a mistake, that she meant nothing to him. It is truly pathetic how quickly an arrogant narcissist crumbles when you take away his stolen money. But I did not feel pity. I felt absolutely nothing. Then his tears turned to anger. He stood up, his face red, and screamed that it did not matter. He yelled that we were married, that this was Ontario, and the law dictated he was entitled to exactly 50% of the marital home. He sneered and told me he would force a sale and drag me through court for years until I was ruined. That was when I handed him the final piece of paper, the document from 10 years ago. When we first moved in together before the wedding, David's credit score was absolute garbage. He was drowning in $75,000 of old debt. To secure the mortgage on this house, I had to pay off his mess. But I did not do it for free. I made him sign a legally binding domestic contract, drafted by a top-tier family lawyer. In that contract, he explicitly waived any and all future claims to the marital home, forever, in exchange for me clearing his debt. He was so desperate back then, he signed it without even reading it properly. He thought that getting married nullified the contract. It did not. Under Canadian family law, a properly executed domestic contract overrides the standard 50-50 split. I watched his eyes scan the paper. I watched his soul leave his body as he read his own signature from 10 years ago. "You do not own half of this house, David," I whispered, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "You own 0%. You have $0. You are holding a forged line of credit that I have already reported to the fraud department, and you are about to be sued for $2 million by a real estate developer in British Columbia." I handed him a customized eviction notice and a set of divorce papers. "You have exactly 30 minutes to pack a single suitcase," I told him, "or I'm calling the police and having you arrested for financial fraud. Your mistress is not answering your calls because my lawyer sent her a warning regarding her involvement in your wire fraud scheme. She blocked you an hour ago." He did not scream anymore. He was completely broken. He packed his bag in dead silence. I stood by the front door as he walked out into the freezing Toronto winter. The snow was blowing sideways, the temperature hovering around -15 degrees. He looked back at me, shivering in his thin designer coat, expecting to see a heartbroken wife. Instead, he saw a woman who had just successfully executed a flawless corporate liquidation. I closed the heavy oak door. I locked the deadbolt. I walked back into my beautiful, warm house, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and enjoyed the absolute perfect silence. Never underestimate the terrifying power of a woman who stops crying and starts calculating.